Welcome, ladies and gents, my name is Curci, and this is a video that I've actually been wanting to do for a while. I just kept putting it on like the back burner. A while ago, my friend asked me, Rick, what are your top 10 most favorite games of all time? And I was like, easy, Skyrim, Mass Effect, Halo. Then I pumped the brakes for a second and I said, wait a minute, let me go deeper. Let me actually think about this intelligently, not just put out a bunch of recent games that I've enjoyed. What are the games, the top 10 games that have made me into the gamer that I am? I went way back in time and actually found 10 really great games that I consider to be my top 10 most favorite games of all time. So let's not waste any time, let's get right into this list. Number 10. Dungeon Keeper 2. This is a game I actually really enjoyed because I think it was the first game that really made me start to think. The premise of the game is that you play as the bad guy. You are the villain of this story. You are the Dungeon Keeper and your goal is to protect the dungeon heart. If it gets destroyed, you're killed. So you try to attract minions, and in order for you to attract them, you need to build certain rooms that will actually get them to come in. If you wanted a vampire, you had to build a graveyard. If you wanted a warlock, you had to build a library. And by accumulating different minions, you start to build your army. It was a real-time strategy game, so tactics and looking at the field and seeing different things that you could do was a big part of the game. For example, the enemies in the game are actually the good guys, so like the heroes, the wizards, and the knights and all that. There were times where I actually provoked them. I sent some of my minions out and I attacked some of them, which caused them to attack my fortress, which enabled all of my traps. I weakened the main force so that when I spilled all of my main forces out at them, they were annihilated. It was a good game because it made me think strategically. It didn't make me play so mindlessly. Early on in the campaign mode, I mean, the story is not all that great. Actually, looking back, I really don't remember what the story is. I know that you're trying to find like these gems. And when you start out, you can throw all of your minions at your enemies and kill them that way. But then as the game progresses, it actually asks you to be maybe a little bit more strategic. Maybe throwing all of your minions at the enemy won't work. You have to kind of draw them out, maybe take some of them out, weaken the main force, and then go in for the kill. Some of the missions actually didn't have the usual attack their base and kill their lord. No, some of them actually were, here's a time limit. When that time limit decreases, the enemy is going to come through the area. You have that much time to prepare so that when they come in, you ambush them and kill them. Otherwise, they're going to leave and then you're going to fail. I like that the game made me think strategically. It was the first game that made me actually start using my head. But I love how the mechanics work, where you have your spells, you can shock people with lightning, you can possess some of your minions. One of my most favorite things to do in the game was sort of like a sandbox mode where you could just have this open area, you could build your dungeon, attract all the minions that you want, and then over in the corner, there's like this shrine, and every time you click on the shrine, it would spawn enemies. So one of the spells in the game is a call to arms. You can put down a flag and all of your minions will gather by the flag. But one of the cool things that I would really like to do is I would click on that shrine so fast and so much that it would just start spawning enemies until the game eventually would catch up. And it would be this massive battle on the outside of my dungeon, and I would just be possessing minions and being right in the middle of it. I really like the game's mechanics. I like how much layers to it. You could put down traps or you could just go out and attack them. You have different minions that have different abilities. It was just, for me, it was a well-layered game that made me think more strategically. I think like a smart gamer because of Dungeon Keeper 2. But let's move on to number 9. Legend of Dragoon. This is a game that probably is a little odd to being on my list because it's a JRPG, and I'm not usually into JRPGs. But this game was awesome, and the reason why is because I felt that it put a focus on story, and it made me actually start to like story. Everybody knows that I hold story as a really high regard when it comes to gaming, and it's probably because of this game. In Legend of Dragoon, you play as a guy named Dart. His friend gets captured, so he goes to try to save his friend, and then he gets wrapped up in a civil war, and then he gets wrapped up even more in like world like ending crap. But it's really cool because it was a great game that really put focus on all your different characters. Every time you went through the game, you were recruiting different party members. In my opinion, for me, and my experience with gaming, this was the first game that actually put a focus on the story and actually started putting focus on a lot of the characters. There was character development. I loved certain characters. I hated certain characters. This was a really long game. It actually came in like 4 discs, and I remember that I looked at it as each disc was a different act. Each one was basically a standalone story, but there was like this overall plot that was kind of feeding into it. But the story was just really good. Each standalone was really good. How it fed into the main plot was really good. The ending I thought was amazing. Basically, the overall experience of the game is that you are a dragoon. Eventually, you'll become a dragoon. But you basically have like this stone that you would get from killing a dragon or maybe taming a dragon. They never really talk about that. And then by using the stone, that if it responds to you, you get really badass armor and wings and stuff. And then also some really awesome powers that you could take into the combat. The combat is a turn-based combat. And I remember playing it for the first time and being like, I don't like turn-based games. But it was good because you could actually plan things out. I had certain characters that healed my other characters. I had potions and stuff. It was really good management because you could put like different abilities and different armor sets. It was a good role-playing-esque kind of game that wasn't exactly role-playing. Like, you didn't have choices in the game. There was a very straightforward narrative. It was like you managed equipment, you managed resources, and you went into combat, and then you planned out the combat the way you needed to in order to win. It was a really great game. Like, you could tell it was like a port from Japanese games because when the cutscenes come in, you can always tell like the lips don't sync up to what is actually being said. And the voice acting is actually but I really like the music in this game. Each area had its own unique music. Felt like I was in a different area, and I got excited going to different areas because I was like, hey, I wonder what music we'll hear now. Like, yeah, there were some repeating tracks. When things got maybe a little bit intense, you heard this one theme, and then you knew a certain character was around. I thought the narrative and the writing was great. I thought the characters were great. I thought the music was great. Even the combat was great. The RPG elements. There was so much I loved about this game. And if I still owned it, I'd play the hell out of it right now. It's a really good game. I actually beat it multiple times. For as long as it is, I actually took the time to beat it multiple times. Ah, it's so good. Number 8. Perfect Dark. Now, I have played GoldenEye before, and I have played it with family members, cousins, and stuff, and I could never really get into the single player because the thing for me when I was growing up is that I have 2 sisters. I don't have any brothers. One of the hardest things ever is to get my sisters to play games with me when I was a kid. I eventually just gave up, but there were times where I actually did get my sisters to play with me, and I could not get anybody for the life of me to play GoldenEye, so I never got into it. You know the game I did really get into? Perfect Dark. If I had to pick a game genre that I actually really enjoyed, like what are the types of games that I like, it would be first-person shooters. And I honestly believe that it's because of Perfect Dark. I really liked the single player in that game. It's got really like horrendous voice acting. As a young, dumb kid, not really interested in story, but hey, this game has aliens in it. The game's writing is all over the place. Like, it's just really corny. Like, the alien comes in and the alien is like, my name is blah, 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 blah. You can call me Elvis, though. I'm like, wait, what? No. But I like how as you up the difficulty, there were other objectives that you could complete, which made the game feel more difficult. I mean, obviously, you up the difficulty and now the game's more difficult. But it was one of those games that it was just like there were more objectives, which made the game more challenging, which meant that more story was being implemented. And as a kid, I remember being there and being like, what are these other objectives that I keep hearing about? So I actually bumped it all the way up to the hardest difficulty, had my strategy guide, and started going throughout each level, very meticulously doing each one. It's a very hard game. It's a very unforgiving game, especially later on. And it's hard to do unless you know where the objectives are, because some of them will have like time-based and you're just running around being like, where's the alien that I have to scan? I'm telling you, the strategy guide helped me out immensely. Like I said before, I don't have any brothers. I grew up with 2 sisters. It was really hard for me to convince them to play video games with me, but it did happen. One of those times and one of those games that we would play was Perfect Dark. Things that we loved to do was load up some bots and then just use the Farsight. I think it's called the Farsight gun. It's one of the best guns in video games. You could shoot through the walls and stuff. And we would just wait for the enemies and just go boom. Oh, I had so much fun because it actually, not only did it help me challenge myself with the more difficulty settings, but it gave me time to bond with my sisters. And of course, oh, that's so sweet. No, Perfect Dark is a game that holds a special place in my heart. It was probably the first real first-person shooter that I actually enjoyed and springboarded me to really enjoy a lot of first-person shooters. The writing was bad, the voice acting is bad, the story is bad, but game's fun. And that's really what it boils down to is your game fun? Perfect Dark? Yep. Number 7. Lord of the Rings Return of the King. This game right here has got to be, in my opinion, the greatest Lord of the Rings game of all time. And it's actually a direct movie licensed game. It pulls directly from the 3rd movie. And it's good. That doesn't happen. Movies and games, that's 2 industries that really don't get along. But occasionally, we get a gem. And here's one of them. And we do get a lot of Lord of the Rings games like Lord of the Rings Online or Battle for Middle-earth or even Shadow of Mordor. Some are good. Most of the time, it's actually not really bad. I actually really enjoyed the hell out of Battle for Middle-earth, which was a real-time strategy game, which was probably, I enjoyed it because I enjoyed Dungeon Keeper 2 so much. But no, this game was ahead of its time. It put you in these epic battles and made you feel like you were in the epic battles. Basic combat scheme, and it just made you feel like, God, you felt like a badass. You felt like you were Legolas. You felt like you were Gandalf. You felt like you were Gimli or Aragorn. One of my favorite things to do in this game is that there is one level where you play as Aragorn or Legolas or Gimli. The goal of this specific level is that you have to open the gate and then go through the gate so you can get to Minas Tirith. But before you do that, you gotta like launch some catapults at some buildings and fight an elephant and fight a bunch of orcs. One of my favorite things to do, because I discovered it, was just to stand in the field and fight all the orcs. Do all the objectives, but not run past the gate, which would end the mission. And just sit there fighting orcs constantly. I remember playing it with my cousin, and the two of us would just completely annihilate orc after orc after orc, and they would just be waves upon waves upon waves. And then we discovered that eventually, after you fight for so long, the enemies will stop spawning. But I honestly can't. Every time I run through that game, I can't play that mission and not annihilate every single orc. Just because it's fun, and you want to keep fighting and keep playing the game for as long as possible. There's another mission later on where you play as Sam trying to rescue Frodo in Cirith Ungol. I'm going to show my nerdism of my knowledge of this universe. But the game is basically telling you to be stealthy, use traps, make the chandeliers drop on people, throw magma or fire on these guys. Like, don't directly engage because you're going to get overwhelmed. So what did I do? I completely engaged everybody. I saw everybody I announced when I entered the room, and I annihilated everybody. Like, it's a very, like, it's your traditional kind of movie licensed game. I mean, it didn't really go really far and beyond with, oh, we just want to be a really good game. No, it stuck to what the films did. It stuck to the narrative. It occasionally showed you something interesting or something new that you probably didn't see in the movies. Like, honestly, Legolas, Aragorn, and Gimli fighting throughout that gate to get to the Battle of Minas Tirith, because that's not the way that they went. They went via ship. But the game makes you go this way because it's more fun to go this way. And then, of course, battling at the Black Gate at the end of the game. Oh, one of my most favorite scenes in that movie is the Battle of the Black Gate. And getting that moment in the game, orcs are surrounding you, you have the armies, eventually you see the armies sort of pan around you, and you're just like, bring it on! Oh, that game was ahead of its time. Made you feel like you were in the battles, made you feel like you were in the movie playing as the characters. Greatness. Greatness is this. Number 6 is a game that maybe not a lot of people are aware of that exists, but it was a game that I played the hell out of when I was a kid, and that was Dragoon Order of the Flame. Basically, you play as a warrior Rin, and then her brother gets captured, and then you have to go save him. Seems to be a pattern with a lot of these games. Older games didn't really want to go off the beaten path when it came to story. So you're on the path to find your brother, you're fighting against these enemies. I remember playing it, lopping off the hands of enemies, and then just seeing them like, oh, as blood squirted out. You know, as an adult, I was just like, there's no real need to have that much gore in the game. Like, I'm an adult now and I can see that way, but as a kid I'm like, ha, it's awesome. But looking back, it was just like, you go so far into the game, you meet up with this dragon Arok, the two of you bond, there's some story behind the bonding, there's so much lore to this game, and it actually feels, I mean, number one, I really like the dragon mechanics in this game. I really like flying on Arok, just going through the region and the valleys and everything, and I love the animation, I love the combat, and even the ground combat was actually really good. It was a good balancing of ground combat and dragon combat, and the game did great of properly placing it out between the two. There's one section in the game where Arok actually gets captured, and you have to go find where he is, so you have to jump to different areas. You have to literally walk from one end of the map to the other end. But these regions were massive, just really big regions. You go and explore, you find cool things. The game was just a really awesome semi-open world because it was only locking you off to certain regions and you couldn't backtrack. At the end of the game, I felt like I had journeyed so far from when I initially started. It's a game about a girl trying to get her brother back, and she teams up with the dragon, and then they encounter this whole big plot with bad guys and stuff. Is the story the greatest thing in game? No, but I did enjoy it. I did like it. I like the lore that surrounded it. The game eventually did get a sequel, which might have been better, but in my opinion, it started with Order of the Flame. If I still had a copy of that game, I would continue to play it right now. Good game in my opinion, or at least one of my favorites. None of the things on this list necessarily have to be good, but they mean something to me. Number 5. Capcom's Aladdin. This is the second movie licensed game on this list, but it's also the oldest game, coming out in 1993. Not only is it a really good game that has very basic platforming mechanics, the game had really good music that really complemented the certain areas in the game, actually complemented a lot to the movie itself, captured the heart of the movie within the game. It's really good, well-made property. But it was also the first video game I ever played. And actually, when looking back, I'm like, would I actually be into games if it wasn't for this game? Because as a kid, I loved the movie Aladdin. I would watch that thing on repeat constantly. And then they told me I could actually be Aladdin. And I said, well, okay then. This led into Donkey Kong Country, which led into Super Mario World, which led into the N64. A lot of my experience in gaming started with Nintendo. I owe a lot to Nintendo for the things that they have done for me in gaming. I wish that they had made just a straight up regular console instead of something that was very gimmicky. But no, I really liked this game. Like I said before, it really captured the movie's heart really well. It was just a very good platformer. It was just a really good game. Now, there was another Aladdin game that came out the exact same time, and Shinji Mikami, the game's designer, thought that that version of the game might have been better just simply because Aladdin had a sword. So it had better combat mechanics, but you can't deny this was still a good game. Not only was it the first game I ever played, but it was also the first game I ever beat. So take that for what you will. Number 4, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. This is the game that started that love for everything BioWare touches for me. This game has everything that you would expect to see in a BioWare game. Really good role-playing aspects, such as really big decision-making. You could be a good guy or a bad guy. You could be on the light side or the dark side, depending on your choices. So, of course, it is a BioWare game, so it's going to put an emphasis on its awesome characters, such as Mission, Karth, Bastila. My favorite, HK-47. I loved the writing of that character. He's very straightforward, where he can't refer to organics as anything other than meat bags, and he sees himself like above, because he's basically a droid that is an assassin droid. So his primary function is to kill people.
Objection. Worn out? Listen, you talentless organic meatbag. One word from my master and I will pull you apart, limb from useless limb. Explanation. It's just that you have all these squishy parts, Master, and all that water. How the constant sloshing doesn't drive you mad, I have no idea.
The stories that this guy has and the way he's written and the way his dialogue is, it is just one of my favorite characters of all time is HK-47. But what I really liked about this game wasn't just about the characters. I mean, the characters were a great big part of it, but one of the things that I really enjoyed was the choices that you made and how impactful it was. Like I said before with Dragon Age Inquisition, was that the best kind of character development is the kind within yourself. And honestly speaking, I had serious character development when I first played through this game. I feel like this game, with its decisions, actually made me mature as a gamer, or even as a person. Originally, people built this game to me, they said, Rick, you can actually be on the dark side, you could be the villain. And I was like, I'm all about it, I'm gonna be the villain. And honestly, in this game, you can be the hero, or you can, in fact, be the villain of the story. The character development that I had is that I played this game, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna be a bad guy, and I was the bad guy, until that pivotal moment, because I had loved the characters, and then I saw certain characters do certain things, and I'm like, wait a minute, if I become the bad guy, I'm gonna have to do bad things to the people I just considered friends. I can't do it. I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't go through with that. I was so invested with the characters. I fell in love with the characters. I was so invested in the game and the game's overall story that when time came for me to actually say, yes, I will be the bad guy, I chickened out and I became the good guy. And ever since then, most games that I play, I'm a good guy. Knights of the Old Republic is my redemption story. I was a very troubled kid. I was wanted to play every game being the bad guy. But Knights of the Old Republic put me on the right path, made me mature. It's a fantastic game. You should play it if you haven't. Oh, God, that game is so good. Number 3, Pokemon Red and Blue. I've spent so much time into these two games. I originally had Blue. The original version that I had for this game was Blue. But again, this is also a very role-playing-esque kind of game. You start as a character, you pick one of 3 Pokemon, and then you go out into the world and you capture other Pokemon. You fight gym leaders, you gather badges, then you get to the league, and then you fight the league leaders or whatever they were called, and then you can still go and revisit other areas. Honestly, I think the show was inspired because of the game, but oh my God, the game was really good. It was just so long, so awesome, and recently they had Twitch Plays Pokemon. I watched that thing when they were playing Pokemon Red. I watched that thing from when I heard about it to the end. And it made me sit down and say to myself, what did I do with my old Game Boy and my old copy of Pokemon? I gave it away to some kid. I don't know. I felt like being a good person that day. Stupid me! But what was really good about that game was that it made me be social. I remember as a kid sneaking in my Game Boy to school, and then when recess kicked on, I was going like with my friends, and we would just link up our games and Pokemon battle. It was just, we would trade Pokemon. There were Pokemon that you could get because you had the red version. There were Pokemon that I could get because I had the blue version. We would trade whoever we didn't have or couldn't get. It was a really good social game because it made me sit down and say to my friends, huh, you have that Pokemon. I have a Pokemon that you can't get that you want. Let's trade. I would play the hell out of it if I still had it. I actually eventually ended up buying the red version as well because I just wanted to capture everything. And I was in the process of doing that when I got bored of the game, didn't touch it for years, and then eventually at some point gave the game away to some kid. That was the dumbest decision ever. But no, seriously, this is fantastic. Number 2. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. This has been the subject of many heated arguments between me and Greg Harkins from the Game Boat. He says that game is not good. This game is in fact awesome. It's the different kind of Legend of Zelda game. I actually played it recently. You play as Link. It's a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, which, by the way, I'm not saying that Majora's Mask is better than Ocarina of Time. Very clearly, Ocarina of Time was a lot better than Majora's Mask, and Majora's Mask just is a proper sequel. It feeds off of the success of that game. But I think Majora's Mask had a really touching story with Skull Kid and the story behind him. It had really awesome, just good mechanics that did carry over from Ocarina of Time. And a lot of people really didn't like the time limit that the game gave you. You have 3 days to complete the game or the world ends. But the game also allows you the ability to reset time, reset the 3 days, and you start on the first day and you just continue to go through your journey. In my opinion, I think that helps draw the game out because the game feels like it's on a schedule. There are only certain side quests are unlocked to you at certain times of the day. And that's the other thing too, is that the majority of the time you're going to spend in this game isn't really with the main story and going through the temples, which, by the way, temples really aren't all that great, especially compared to Ocarina of Time. But what I really enjoyed was the side quests. Some of the really in-depth stuff. Some of them actually span between all 3 of those days. Just really in-depth game, really well thought out and well scripted. Each area of the game had its own tone and story, and I thought the music was really good. This game is also pretty dark with its story. In certain areas, there's one section in the game where there's like this music box house, and then there's a girl inside. You can lure the girl out of the house and then sneak into the house. In the basement is the girl's father, and he's being like, he's half mummy and half human, but he's like not really human anymore. Like he's starting to turn into a mummy. And then you play the Song of Healing and it'll heal him. Then the little girl comes running down the stairs, gives her dad a hug, and the two of them just have like this really emotional moment. In the background, you hear the Song of Healing, and that's just playing, but it's very minor, like very like slow. And oh my God, that moment is incredible. It almost brings you to tears, and it's just how great this game is with how touching it can be and the way that it implements its music. It's just a really good Zelda game. It's off the beaten path of what you would expect in a Zelda game. There's no mention of the Triforce, no mention of Ganondorf. Zelda has a cameo. In my opinion, Majora's Mask is a really great, solid installment into the Legend of Zelda series, and one of the things that I really regret, the last Nintendo product that I have ever owned was the GameCube, and one of the things that I have always regretted about not getting into the Wii or not getting into the Wii U are the Zelda titles, and I miss them. But I've spent so much time in Majora's Mask, not only just because of the side quests, but because of the masks as well. I remember playing that game and thinking to myself, you know what? I want to collect every mask. And it kind of did play into that completionist side of me. It was a proper sequel to a fantastic franchise, and it's just a really good game. And now we have finally reached the #1 spot. What is my all-time favorite game of all time? It is a game that came out in 2001, and that game is Dark Age of Camelot. Dark Age of Camelot, if you're unaware, is an MMORPG. It is a massively multiplayer online game. So it's like World of Warcraft. It's like Rift. It's like Lord of the Rings Online. It's an MMO, and I'm not really into MMO-esque games. But Dark Age of Camelot was a game I just got. I understood everything. I understood how the leveling system worked. I understood the economy of the game. I understood how the politics of the game worked. There were several runs at this game that I had. When I first played it, I really had no idea what I was doing. I was a kid. I was dumb. My uncle was playing it. He got me into it. My second run of it was a little bit more together. I knew what I was doing. I knew what I had to do to level up and spec my characters. And leveled up, capped multiple characters, fully templated them up with gear so that their like resistances and their stats all just worked so well. I was incredible at creating templates for characters. I had like Gear Bunny, which I think was the program that I used, and I just had certain stats. I have to go get this artifact, and I have to go get this specific item, and I have to go farm things. And you know what? For all the reasons that I bash Destiny for its farming and its loot and grindy, I did all of those things in this game because this game just did all of those things well. The game has a story. Never really paid attention to it. That's not why I played. The reason why I played is to level up and be in the PvP, to be in what was known as realm versus realm. In this game, there are 3 realms. You have Albion, you have Midgard, and you have Hibernia. And all 3 of them are in the frontiers fighting each other for the control of keeps and relics. Each realm had 2 relics. One was power, one was strength. One helped out the DPS melee guys, the other one helped out the spellcasters. You attack certain keeps, which will unlock the gate so that you can go in and you can grab their relics and then bring it back to one of your keeps so you can plant it. But oh my god, the game was just really well thought out with it. It was actually a really huge trendsetter when it came to its PvP. Won multiple awards for it. I played this game for the RVR. When I grinded out levels and started farming gear and templating my characters up and then speccing them the way that I needed to spec them was only because I wanted to take them into the RVR. I actually had a second account for a buff bot, which was just a character that I leveled up, and he would just give like a bunch of buffs to my character, and then he would take that out into the field and start killing dudes. Grouping up with other players, getting up with your guildmates, helping your guildmates get into a really good alliance, and then really learn the crafting of the game, start to get some money so that you can buy the gear so that you can get it on your character. There were so many layers to this game. Even the RVR. The RVR had a strategy. I would run stealth groups inside of the game. I would actually partake in some of the well thought out structured groups that needed specific classes to actually do well, and I got huge amounts of points because there is like a point system in realm versus realm. As you kill enemy players, you get what are called realm points, and then you'll get a realm rank, which you can get special abilities. Oh, there were so many layers to that game. I spent a sickening amount of time into that game, and it actually was in waves. It was always like I would play the game for most of the year. November came around, I got out of the game, started playing some AAA games, and then when those died down around the March area or around January and all that, I would jump right back into Dark Age of Camelot and then just be there until the next year's November. Occasionally taking breaks for games that would come out in spring, but continuing to go forward. The game, I understood it. I understood every key thing about the game. I spent so much time into it. I actually recently forgot all my passwords and stuff. Otherwise, I would restart my account and go back into it. Tried to do that recently. I went into the game and I was like, you know what? I want to start up the account and just maybe see if anybody that I used to play with is still playing, and maybe group up with them if they're still playing, and then just continue to go from there, because it's a game you really don't forget. It's almost like riding a bike. Once you play it and once you're invested to a certain regard, you never forget how to play those classes. God, it was a really good game. If I could still play it, I would. And I could start up a new account, but I had so many characters in my old account, which the passwords I don't remember. It sucks because I'm not going to want to re-roll everything and start from the beginning. It's kind of lame, but I am going to recognize that I spent so much time into Dark Age of Camelot, and it is by far my #1 favorite game of all time. And that'll conclude it for this video, guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.